Hello and welcome to another plus-size kite review, where in this video I take another short trip away from the realm of pure big air to cover another excellent freeride do-it-all style kite with the latest release from the collaboration between F1 and Brainchild with the new Bandit. I also had the fortune while doing this kite review of using the latest bar from F1, the new Atom bar, so I'll be discussing that as well towards the end of the review. A huge thanks for F1 for getting this kite and bar out to me. If you'd like to know a bit more about the technical aspects of the kite and their other models, I've left a link in the description to some other content on the Bandit and the Brainchild technical aspects. As usual, if you're looking to get your hands on one, I'd recommend Matt Kite, who usually provide me with most of the demos for these videos, so there will also be a link to them for all your F1 needs stateside. As usual, I was testing and comparing this kite to the others I mentioned by using the Surfr app, because I always like to know just how high I'm going consistently from kite to kite and from trick to trick, be it loop, board off, rotation, or just straight jumps. If you're looking to progress with your riding and improve your tricks and technical skills, it's certainly a must in my opinion. Now, with that out of the way, let's have a look at this saucy little red weapon. Now, due to lack of wind up here in Auckland where I live, after I got my hands on this kite, and because I was pretty amped to give it a fly, my friends and I did a little chasing down country to get some water time in the 25 to 30 knots and more that I needed for a big air kite review. I was particularly excited about this kite because of a few reasons. First off, the trigger I reviewed earlier this year has been one of my favorite kites in quite a while. I have thus far really enjoyed all of the Brainchild collaborations with every brand where I've tried those kites, and with no experience at all on Bandits since around 2013 when I first tried kiting on one of my dad's, I think it was a Bandit 6, I've not really had any experience with this legendary model. It's also not a traditional big air focused kite, and I have been wanting to do more reviews on Freeride Kites, not just for my own interest in how they perform in the big air arena, but to just get some more experience riding them overall, even if my reviews generally do focus more on the big air aspects of them. I have to admit though, I was certainly a little nervous first taking it out in these spots because they do tend to get pretty strong gusts, pretty big holes, and to me that didn't exactly scream the ideal conditions for a 3-strut freeride kite. But boy, was I pleasantly surprised once I actually got the kite out and got on the water. Now, when I first launched the kite, where we did for this first session at a spot called the Foxton River mouth, you have to launch downwind from about 500 meters worth of rolling sand dunes, and to get to the actual spot where you kite at, you have to walk out keeping the kite nice and high and then ride upwind to the actual spot. Now, as soon as I put the Bandit up in the air, I was very pleasantly surprised at how stable it was given the location. And I had no issues walking down to the water with it or riding upwind without it backstalling or momentarily falling out of position in the window. I was actually so surprised at how well it was flying that I thought the wind must be a lot cleaner than it usually is there. And it wasn't until after the session when I was chatting to the other guys that they started talking about how gusty and on-off the wind was. But that was not the experience I'd had in the 90 odd minutes of session we had. Once I had it airborne and was getting my first impressions, the kite was very light on the bar, as you might expect from a Brainchild model, which you would have heard me talk about in previous ones. It had a very nice direct feel from the lighter Atom bar to the kite, and was very nicely balanced in that the speed of the kite translated very well to the amount of input and effort it required from my movements. Despite being a different shape, lower aspect, and sitting a deeper position in the window than I am generally used to with most of the kites I ride and test, I still found the kite very easy to pilot around and very predictable. Certainly, because of its design, there is more consistent power delivery as you move it around, but it's not at all overwhelming, and the kite does a great job of managing its speed and your control of it. Now, of course, when I would go to jump, there were some changes to my technique that I learned I needed to focus on to get a better launch off the water and longer flight, and I did find myself at times not getting a lot of lift or hang time due to my technique that I'm used to from the other bigger focused kites, which is often the case for me when I also use these ultra fast modern kites in smaller sizes. But I'll go into that a little bit more detail when I talk about boosting and hang time. Now, despite not being completely dialed in the boosting right away, I never felt uncomfortable on the kite right from the get-go, and I was literally looping at my second jump ever on the kite. Then again, I looped it on my third or fourth jump on my weaker side. So even when riding the kite for a crazy second session in this footage here at Plimerton, when I went back to back with the trigger for the first time, it still felt so easy enough to control that I was very happy to send some pretty big loops in both directions, something I don't often have the stones to do with quite a number of other kites I test. If I had to say which kite this version of the Bandit reminded me of the most of the ones I've tested, I would have to say it was the Reed and Hyper model, but perhaps not quite as fast in exchange for a bit more stability, ease of use, particularly with jumping, and I found it a little easier to execute the jumps and get a bit more hang time out of this kite. Now, this might suggest the Reedon is just a bit higher potential performance as it is so fast, but I was feeling like I was getting a bit more out of the Bandit while I was riding it, which admittedly is of course subjective, and I would also attribute a little bit of that to the bar, which I will cover later. Now, moving on to the key categories, starting with boosting and hang time. Let me just start by trying my best to explain what I find to be the differences in boosting with a more high aspect big air focus kite and a lower aspect freeride style kite like this Bandit, because I think it's fairly relevant to the boosting potential for most riders using this kite, and it will likely be a reason some might not get the same results that the kite is capable of at first. So first off, as far as I understand it, the lower aspect kites ride a bit further back in the window and don't want to shoot as quickly forward as the boostier higher aspect big air kites will. So you will likely need to build up even more speed, time your edging a bit earlier, and really focus on getting even more line tension to get the kite to more aggressively push forward with that burst of speed and line tension before you send the kite. You also have to be even more mindful not to oversend this kite, as with most Brainchild kites, because they're just so fast. And with the lower aspect kites, the sweet spot is going to be a fair bit smaller. I'm always guilty of oversending these faster 9-meter kites in my reviews, as you would have noticed, but the great thing with these Brainchild kites is they are also very forgiving, so when you do, even if you're not getting the max height out of it, you are going to get away with a lot more form when it comes to, say, looping and just jumping in general, if you can keep the kite in control. In terms of jumping technique, a really good preload pop will of course get the job done, but personally I find it quite a hard technique to time on these faster kites, so it's going to be even more challenging on these models. I highly recommend the boosting videos done by Advocate or the Get High with Mike videos on how to improve in these areas, so I've popped some links in the description on them. Now, why I went over all of that is because, like other freeride kites that are shaped like this and are good at so many disciplines, the boosting potential just isn't going to be as easily gifted. and that means better technique, timing, and kite control through the jump are really going to add a lot more to your sending potential. At first with this Bandit, I was just sending it like I would the trigger and was a bit disappointed in the lack of lift I was getting. But after some practice and thinking about where the kite was positioning itself, and also upon reviewing my jumping stats with my friends who tend to jump as high as me on other kites, I found with a little adjustments I was getting similar heights to them as they rode their orbits and eras. Now, it certainly wasn't as consistent, and I wouldn't say the potential is as reliable as those other excellent boosters, but in the right circumstances, with good technique, you can certainly keep up with most moderately powerful big air models. But I certainly wouldn't put this in the same category of sender as them, especially for most riders. They're certainly just a tier below. I also found the challenge of keeping up with my mates in the boosting department to be actually very rewarding on this kite. And I think with more time on it, I could get a lot better and do even more consistent higher jumps. Now, how that translates to hand time, I also found the kite fairly decent for a 3-strut non-Alula model. Now, certainly not on par with the likes of the Trigger I was riding it back to back with, but for me, I found a little more hang time than I did on the Hyper model, and I was able to land board-offs with a little higher jumps and well-timed kite movement, generally by using a bit more of the window than I might on kites like the Rebels, Vortex, Triggers, etc. The beauty of this really light bar pressure is that the kite is very easy to pilot with one hand, and that's something that could be certainly a big help, not just for your board-offs, but when you're progressing to single-handed kite loops and kite loop board-offs. So, with moderate stats attributed to boosting, what does that mean for looping for most riders? Well, as you might expect if you watched a few of my videos, I tend to find an easy to pilot kite that is very light on the bar, an ideal one for looping and getting into loops. The kite is lightning fast around the loop when you engage that bar, and it turns in a super direct, high and tight loop with very little pull. That is very confidence building and quite easy to execute. That does of course mean, however, that because the kite is so fast, sits a bit deeper in the window, and doesn't have the same amount of hang time as some of the top big air kites, that you are going to have to be a little bit more active with your piloting to get consistent lifty catches after your loops. But the kite will help you here a lot with its speed, its lack of pull through the loops, and just how generally easy it is to fly around. The kite gets around so quickly and easily that it means you can try for loops from almost no height at all. And the gap between throwing baby loops while you're first starting off and then progressing to higher, more powered loops can be broken down into smaller gaps in height. What I mean by that is usually you would do your first baby loops when you're trying loops for the first time around 1 to 2 meters high. Then have a likely gap of around 3 to 4 meters where you're going to have to build up confidence to start looping properly with catches in the safe zone, say over 5 or 6 meters. But with a super fast kite like this that pulls the loops quite high, you can kind of work your way up in smaller amounts, so say 1 or 2 meters at a time. Being able to loop and get catches from only 2, 3, or 4 meters high would have been a miracle for me when I was first progressing with kite loops, and I think it's going to help a lot of riders get into them. Now, I would certainly advise riders looping this kite to make sure they have their helis down first, as there is not as much gifted lift if you just pull a tight heli loop above your head, and you will find yourself plopping down faster out of the sky if you don't pilot the kite a little further outside of the window, so it's making sure it's passing over 12 as you do the heli. Once again though, like with the timing of the boosting, I did find this kite not particularly challenging to implement this technique, and it was also very rewarding when I was getting it right. So adjusting to it even in gusty conditions was not particularly challenging for me. As you've heard me say in most of my videos, if you are getting into your first loops, it makes a world of difference to your confidence if you can loop a kite high and tight without too much pull, and this kite certainly does that wonderfully. So, with a lovely combination of being easy to fly and forgiving in gusty conditions, however a bit challenging admittedly to access height and hang time, how would that affect your confidence building? Well, for me, it certainly gave me a lot of confidence right out of the gate, even in the challenging conditions I was riding it in the first 2 days. Although, sadly, you may notice I'm not doing my usual basic kite loop variations with this Bandit, because I had recently hurt my neck and was riding sore for most of the review. Despite the injury and struggle to turn my head to the right, I was feeling really confident with this kite without doing those tricks, and did actually have to fight the urge to throw some boogies or other variations on this kite because I was feeling a little too confident in it. And particularly how it managed the power in the stronger wind conditions. Although it will be more challenging to progress in height and boosting than a more traditional sheet and go big air kite, this ease of use will give progressing riders a lot of confidence to ride in stronger conditions, I'd wager, and also help them feel confident to send the kite more aggressively when particularly lit up, which again is only going to help their technique. The same should go for trying loops, where it will be easier for many beginning loopers to build into their first powered loops, and those who are just starting as well with powered loops to get them bigger as well, as I already mentioned when talking about looping. But perhaps take note, the kite may even give some riders a bit of false confidence if they have not yet already dialed in those helis and learnt some soft landing skills first. Of the recent freeride focused kites I've been testing so far this year, perhaps the Evo SLS being a little slower might have the edge over this one for pure get up off the water riding at a beginner level and for sheet and go boosting, and the Cabrina Switchblade would lead those kites in the freestyle area because of its shape and how much slower it is. But I do think this Bandit will be far better suited for multidiscipline riding, from big air to foiling or wave riding, and particularly for kite loop progression over those other ones. I think of them, it is also my overall favorite for the complete package across the range. Now, in general though, as a more big air focused rider here in New Zealand, I do still personally prefer the Trigger overall, but I do love the idea of a quiver with at least 1 or 2 Bandits in it, for foil and wave riding in particular. This kite made me think back to a trip some time ago in Mauritius, where I was doing some strapless riding on my orbits at the time, where I would have loved to have traded them in for this kite just to be able to hit the waves for half my session, then work on some big air and kite loop tricks on my twin tip and the other half. In terms of the scores, it is a bit tricky to pinpoint where this kite sits because of the fact that its riding style is quite a bit different, so I will try to score it like I would for other kites, where these scores are based around what a progressing rider up to and around my level would likely find this kite sitting in terms of the market. So if you're a freeride kite fan who's looking for a do-it-all kite, this for me is a must-try on the market. And if you have any experience with Bandits, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on them below, or which other freeride focused kites you think I should be getting out and testing, and I'll do my best to get hold of them. As usual, also if you have any thoughts that I probably have left off as to how to better improve my riding style with a freeride kite, particularly in terms of getting the most out of them when boosting, I'd love to hear those comments as well. Now, before I wrap this up, I also wanted to mention my experience on this new F1 Atom Bar, for which I've included a link in the description about its various new features and tech. So for me, when I first got it out to actually try the bar, I also decided to try it with a kite I was more familiar with and rode it with the Trigger, because I just wanted to get a feel for the bar itself rather than the bar and a new kite as well. so I could tell the differences from what I was familiar with in other bars. My first immediate note was that I was quite surprised how light the bar felt in my hand, and this did throw me off a little bit after coming from the Harlem bar, which I've been riding a lot with the Trigger Kite. With not too much time riding, however, I did find I got used to it fairly quickly. Of the different kites I ended up trying it on, I particularly enjoyed it the most and felt it was really well suited and beautifully balanced with that Bandit, which was a lighter and faster style kite, so it lined up even more with the lighter weight of the bar. The ability as well to quite easily adjust the Y to go low V by taking it off of the new Y distributor was a fun feature, although I didn't really need to test it with the kites I was flying it with. The grip itself is quite good, and I had no issues holding onto it over long sessions in varying hot and warmer and colder conditions, with as well a lot of rain, as you can see in these clips. Comfortable grip for us in New Zealand is quite a big deal, as our winters do tend to get quite cold when the wind gets to its strongest. The bar also has a unique width adjustment feature that was quite easy to use on the shore to make the bar shorter or wider. However, I will say in cold conditions while on the water with the kite in the air, I was unable to adjust it, which I'm not actually sure if you're supposed to, given there's so much power running through the lines controlling the kite. Now, the bar isn't an auto unwind, which I know some people won't love, but it's not really something I care about, as I've had a lot of bad experiences with auto unwind bars and their habit of needing a lot of little replacement parts, at least with the exception of the Harlem bar I ride quite often and the North bar I've been riding with a lot of tests over the last year. I would say for this particular kite, the Bandit that I've been reviewing, both of those bars, however, are getting a bit too heavy, and having this much lighter bar just seemed like a much better fit and was more well balanced with the very light, quick kite. I tend to like heavier bars with heavier, more powerful kites and lighter bars with lighter, faster kites. I also love that F1 have added replacement centerpieces for this bar in the actual bar's bag that it comes with, which is a massive pet peeve of mine with my truss bars, and was as well when I had a Core Sensor 3 Pro bar in the past, as they would both eat through little plastic parts fairly quickly and I'd be replacing them each year. Now, I can't speak to the durability of the bar, but the lines do seem quite strong, because I've only been using it a half dozen to a dozen times. But I did find it also was quite compatible with my 10 meter Evo D-Lab, as you can see in this session where I gave it a blast for a couple of hours. And I didn't even bother to move the Y splitter to the higher position recommended for duotone kites at the 4.5 meter mark from the bar. So speaking of durability, I should also add I don't really test for this given the short time I have each kite. However, I did get to learn these Brainchild kites are easy to repair, when sadly at the end of a session I had on the Bandit, when putting the kite down, it must have caught a sneaky little edge of an oyster shell, which nicked a 1 centimeter long cut through the leading edge and bladder, so it of course needed repair. Thankfully, I was really stoked to find out that these Brainchild kites can be repaired at any local kite shop as easily as they would do a traditional Dacron kite, and I had it back within a day. This is a real pleasure for me to find out for future reference, and to be able to answer the dozen-odd people who've asked me about these kinds of things over the years. So there you have it, another great review in the bag for an excellent kite. As always, thank you for making it this far in a long video. Please hit the like and subscribe. Share this video in your kite groups, and of course check out my Instagram, Jason of Montreal, to see what I'm riding and reviewing next, as well as a big summer project I have that I've started sharing on Insta. And of course you'll get to see lots of nice New Zealand scenery. I don't have any big air kites lined up to test right now, so if you are close to a brand or have any you'd like to recommend, tag them or get some contacts from me and I'll get in touch. Hopefully I can get a few more in before the end of the year, and by Christmas do the kite tier list idea I have mentioned in the last few reviews. So until next time, goodbye.